The alien diplomat dropped his cup, not because he was shocked, because his hands had started shaking. The crystal cup shattered across the polished conference floor, and suddenly every conversation inside the Galactic Council chamber stopped. Ambassador Vexer of the Thal Collective stared at the holographic display floating above the negotiation table. Then he stared at the human delegation, then back at the display. That, he said slowly, that cannot be correct. The human ambassador smiled politely. I'm afraid it is. Around the room, dozens of alien representatives leaned forward. The number hanging in the air seemed impossible. Surely there had been a translation error, a unit conversion mistake, some kind of misunderstanding. Vexer cleared his throat. Human Ambassador Williams. Yes, your report states that your homeworld orbits a G-type main sequence star. Correct. The diplomat's face tightened, and this star's surface temperature is approximately 5,500 degrees Celsius? Roughly. Several alien delegates visibly recoiled. One actually made a choking sound. The human ambassador frowned. Is something wrong? Nobody answered immediately, because among the civilized worlds of the galaxy, stars like Sol were considered dangerous, extremely dangerous. Most inhabited planets orbited cooler stars, safer stars, gentler stars, stars that didn't constantly bombard nearby worlds with terrifying amounts of radiation. Finally, a delegate from the Lauren Republic spoke. Humans. Yes. How close is your planet to the star? Williams checked his tablet, then gave the answer. The room exploded. Several translators malfunctioned, trying to process the simultaneous shouting. One ambassador nearly fell out of his chair. Another began frantically calculating orbital distances. Vexer felt sweat forming beneath his ceremonial robes. For the first time in his diplomatic career. That's inside the habitable zone, he asked. Williams blinked. Of course. The aliens looked horrified. The human looked confused. Neither side understood why. Then a scientist from the Council Observatory suddenly stood up. His face had gone pale. Wait. Everyone turned toward him. The scientist's hands trembled as he manipulated the holographic display. New data appeared. Solar flare records. Magnetic storm reports. Radiation measurements. The human ambassador casually nodded. Those look accurate. The scientist stared at him, then whispered the words that would soon spread across the entire galaxy. You evolved there? Silence. William smiled. Well, yes. The scientist slowly sat back down. Around the chamber, alien diplomats exchanged nervous looks. Because they had just realized something disturbing, they hadn't discovered a civilization that survived despite living near Sol. They had discovered a civilization that existed because of it, and nobody was entirely sure what that meant. The meeting was supposed to be routine, a cultural exchange, some trade discussions, a few ceremonial speeches. Instead, it was rapidly turning into a crisis, because the more the Galactic Council learned about Earth, the more uncomfortable they became. Ambassador Williams noticed the growing tension. Have we said something offensive? No. Several diplomats answered immediately. Then one quietly added, just alarming. The human delegation exchanged confused glances. At the center of the chamber, a giant hologram of the solar system rotated slowly. Scientists from dozens of worlds had gathered around it, and every few minutes, another one would discover something new to panic about. A blue-skinned astronomer pointed toward Jupiter. What is that? Williams looked. Jupiter. No, I mean the storm. Oh. The human smiled. The great red spot. The scientist enlarged the image. His eyes widened. That storm is larger than entire planets. That's correct. And it has existed for centuries? At least. The scientist sat down immediately. Apparently he'd heard enough. Then another researcher stepped forward, a reptilian physicist. What about these? He highlighted a cluster of symbols near Earth. Williams glanced at them. Asteroid impacts? The physicist nodded. Your records show multiple extinction-level events. Yes. The room became silent. The alien looked concerned. Your civilization survived them? Williams shrugged. Not all at once. The silence somehow became worse. Across the chamber, Ambassador Vexer was beginning to understand why humans had such a strange reputation across the frontier. Every species adapted to comfortable conditions. Humans adapted to disasters. Then the observatory scientist spoke again. His voice sounded shaky. Show them. Several researchers looked nervous. Are you sure? We need know. A new image appeared above the table. At first, the human delegation didn't understand the reaction. Then they recognized it. It was a solar flare, a beautiful arc of plasma erupting from the sun. The aliens were staring at it the way humans might stare at a nuclear explosion. That's, whispered one diplomat. A medium-sized flare, Williams explained. Half the room looked ready to faint. The scientist enlarged the data. The energy output appeared beside the image. Suddenly, several ambassadors stood up. One began pacing. Another started muttering calculations. Then Vexer looked directly at the humans. How often does your star do that? Williams considered the question. Pretty regularly. The diplomat closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he looked exhausted. Humans. Yes. Your son is trying to kill you. The human delegation burst out laughing. The aliens didn't, because they weren't joking. And moments later, things would get much, much worse. A military analyst had just opened Earth's planetary history file, and what he found inside made the temperature of the sun seem like the least dangerous thing about humanity. The military analyst wished he hadn't opened the file. For several seconds, he simply stared at the screen. Then he checked the data again. Then a third time. The numbers didn't change. Slowly, he raised his hand. Ambassador Vexer. The diplomat looked over. What is it? The analyst swallowed. I think we've been asking the wrong questions. That got everyone's attention. The scientist expanded Earth's planetary history file onto the central hologram. Images appeared. Earthquakes, volcanoes, tsunamis, hurricanes, wildfires. The room became uncomfortably quiet. A delegate finally pointed toward one image. What is that? Williams glanced up. Volcano. No, the glowing red liquid. Lava. The alien looked concerned. Your planet leaks molten rock onto the surface? Sometimes. Several diplomats began whispering nervously. The analyst continued scrolling. The situation somehow became worse. Massive earthquakes splitting cities apart. Hurricanes larger than continents. Blizzards capable of freezing entire regions. Gigantic ocean waves swallowing coastlines. The delegates stared in disbelief. One ambassador slowly raised a trembling hand. How many death worlds has humanity colonized? Williams looked confused. Death worlds. The entire room stared. The human ambassador smiled. We only have one home world. Nobody looked relieved. The analyst enlarged a geological report. Then another. Then another. Each one seemed more absurd than the last. Finally, he stopped. What does this mean? A graph appeared. Earth's tectonic activity. Williams shrugged. It means our planet is geologically active. The analyst looked horrified. Your continents move? Very slowly. The alien sat down. He suddenly looked tired. Very tired. Then the observatory scientist noticed something else. His eyes widened. No. Everyone turned. What now? Vexer asked. The scientist pointed toward Earth's moon. That can't be right. Williams glanced at the display. Oh. The scientist looked directly at him. Your moon stabilizes your planet's axial tilt? Yes. The room froze. The scientist rapidly entered calculations. More data appeared. Then his face went pale. Without this moon. Williams nodded. Life probably never develops the way it did. The scientist slowly lowered his hands. The implications were staggering. Not only had humanity evolved beside a dangerously active star, not only had they survived a world full of natural disasters, Their civilization existed because an extraordinarily unlikely series of cosmic events had occurred perfectly. The odds were almost impossible. Then another diplomat noticed something buried deep in Earth's biological records. His eyes widened. "Oh, stars!" "What?" asked Vexer. The diplomat looked up. His voice was barely above a whisper. "Forget the planet." The room became silent. "Look at what lives on it." And as thousands of species from Earth began appearing across the holographic display, alien diplomats suddenly realized the planet itself wasn't humanity's greatest challenge. Its wildlife was. The chamber became so quiet that the hum of the holographic projectors seemed deafening. Hundreds of species from across the galaxy stared at the display. Earth's wildlife rotated slowly above the conference table. At first, the aliens didn't understand the concern. Many worlds had animals. Many worlds had predators. That wasn't unusual. Then the data began appearing, and the room's collective confidence evaporated. A scientist enlarged the image of a tiger. The massive striped predator prowled across the hologram. Its muscles rippled beneath its fur. Its eyes locked onto the viewer. The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably. "That creature hunts for food?" Williams nodded. "Yes." The scientist swallowed. "It hunts alone. Usually." Several diplomats exchanged nervous looks. Pack predators were common. Solo predators that large were less common. Then another image appeared. A polar bear. The room somehow became quieter. The bear stood on its hind legs. The height measurement appeared beside it. One ambassador nearly dropped his datapad. "Why is it so big?" Williams shrugged. "It's cold where they live." The answer somehow made everything worse. Then came wolves, lions, crocodiles, Komodo dragons, sharks. Each species generated more concern than the last. Finally, Vexer rubbed his forehead. "How many apex predators does Earth possess?" Williams thought for a moment. "Depends how you define apex predator." The room erupted into frustrated groans. That was not the reassuring answer anyone wanted. Then the observatory scientist enlarged another file. This one contained a picture of a human. The delegates frowned. "What are we looking at?" The scientist zoomed out. The image changed. A human stood surrounded by wolves. Another image showed a human riding a horse. Another showed humans swimming with massive marine animals. Another showed a child hugging a creature that looked capable of removing limbs. The room froze. Vexer blinked, then blinked again. "What exactly are we seeing?" William smiled. "Our relationship with wildlife." The diplomat looked horrified. "Relationship?" Another image appeared. A human veterinarian examining a tiger. A wildlife researcher standing beside a bear. A conservationist feeding a crocodile. The aliens stared in disbelief. These weren't prisoners. They weren't trophies. They weren't military assets. Humans voluntarily spent time near them. One scientist pointed shakily at the display. "Those things can kill you." "Absolutely." "And you approach them anyway?" Williams nodded. "Sometimes we rescue them." The room fell silent. Then one final image appeared. A human child sleeping beside a giant dog. The dog was descended from wolves, predators, hunters, killers, yet it lay protectively beside the child. The delegates couldn't comprehend it. Finally, Vexer spoke. "Humans." "Yes." "Why would a predator trust you?" William smiled. The answer seemed obvious to him. "Because we understand them." The diplomat opened his mouth to respond, then stopped, because another report had just arrived from the Council archives. One labeled, "Sol, System Threat Assessment." The official reading it suddenly turned pale, very pale, and when he looked up his voice shook. "Ambassadors." "What now?" Vexer asked. The official swallowed. "We've been evaluating Earth." "Yes, we should have been evaluating the entire solar system." The room went silent, because according to the report, Earth wasn't the most dangerous thing orbiting the sun. The chamber was no longer a diplomatic conference. It had become a disaster briefing. Ambassadors who had arrived expecting trade negotiations were now sitting in stunned silence as the solar system rotated above the central table. Earth glowed peacefully in blue and white, but nobody was looking at Earth anymore. They were looking beyond it, at everything else sharing humanity's neighborhood. The official who had opened the threat assessment report cleared his throat. "We have made a serious analytical error." Ambassador Vexer sighed. "Another one?" The official nodded. "Several, actually." A holographic image of Jupiter expanded across the room. The giant gas planet dwarfed every nearby object. One diplomat frowned. "It's just a planet." The scientist looked horrified. "Just a planet?" He enlarged the data. The room fell silent. Jupiter's immense gravity well appeared as a glowing field stretching across millions of kilometers. Then thousands of asteroid trajectories lit up the display. Most were redirected. Some were captured. Others were thrown completely out of the system. The realization spread through the room. Jupiter wasn't merely a planet. It was a shield, a colossal celestial body protecting Earth from countless impacts. Williams nodded. "We call it the solar system's vacuum cleaner." Several ambassadors stared. The phrase somehow made the giant planet seem even more terrifying. Then another image appeared. Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, the outer planets formed a vast gravitational defense network. The analyst looked increasingly uncomfortable. The probability of a civilization evolving under these conditions is astonishing. Then he opened another file. A file that immediately changed the mood of the room. Near-Earth objects, asteroids, comets, potential impactors. The room watched as ancient collision records appeared, one after another. Some prehistoric, some recent, some frighteningly close. A diplomat slowly raised his hand. "Your species tracks all of these?" Williams nodded. "Of course." "Why?" The human delegation exchanged puzzled looks. "Because eventually one of them might hit us." The room froze. "Eventually?" "Sure." The alien delegates stared. Humans weren't speaking hypothetically. They were planning for it, as though being struck by a mountain falling from space was merely another item on a future to-do list. Then the observatory scientist noticed something hidden in the report. His eyes widened. "Oh, stars." Vexer groaned. "What now?" The scientist enlarged the entry. A list appeared. Planetary defense systems, orbital interception programs, asteroid deflection projects, military contingency plans. The room went silent. One ambassador pointed nervously. "Those are weapons." Williams smiled. "Mostly." The scientist looked pale. "You built a planetary defense network?" "Yes." "For asteroids?" "Originally." The diplomat's expression changed. "Originally?" The human ambassador immediately realized his mistake. The room leaned forward. Nobody breathed, because everyone suddenly wanted to know the same thing. If those defenses were no longer meant only for asteroids, then what exactly were humans expecting to arrive from space? The silence in the Galactic Council chamber became almost unbearable. Every diplomat, every scientist, every military observer was staring at Ambassador Williams. The human had just accidentally revealed that Earth's planetary defense network wasn't designed only for asteroids, which raised a very uncomfortable question. What else was it designed for? Williams sighed. The reaction told him he had made a mistake, a very human mistake, the kind where you assume everyone already knows something. Unfortunately, nobody in the room did. Ambassador Vexer slowly folded his hands. "Human ambassador." "Yes." "What exactly do you mean by originally?" Williams hesitated. The entire chamber leaned forward. Finally, he answered. "Well," a pause. "We built asteroid defenses because Earth gets hit by things." The diplomats nodded nervously. That much they understood. Then Williams continued. "But once the infrastructure existed, people started asking questions." Vexer frowned. "What questions?" The human smiled, the kind of smile that made every alien in the room uneasy. Questions like, A holographic image appeared. A large asteroid. Then another image appeared. A hostile spacecraft. The room went silent. Williams shrugged. The math is pretty similar. Several diplomats visibly stiffened. The military analysts immediately began reviewing the data. Their expressions grew increasingly alarmed. One scientist finally spoke. Wait. He enlarged the schematics. His face went pale. These interception systems. Williams nodded. Aha! They can target objects moving much faster than asteroids. Correct. The scientist looked ill. The room erupted into frantic discussion. Because they had just realized something extraordinary. Humanity's first planetary defense system wasn't built after joining the galaxy. It wasn't built in response to alien threats. Humans had developed it before confirming intelligent life even existed. Just in case something hostile eventually showed up. Vexer rubbed his temples. You prepared for an alien invasion before meeting aliens? Williams looked confused. Didn't everyone? The answer generated horrified silence. No, nobody had. Most civilizations assumed the galaxy would be peaceful. Humanity apparently assumed the opposite. Then, a military officer from the Council Defense Bureau opened another file, a classified one. His eyes widened. Oh no! Every head turned. What now? Vexer asked. The officer slowly rotated his screen. The room stared, then froze. The document wasn't about planetary defense. It was about human contingency planning. Thousands of contingency plans. For every imaginable disaster. Supervolcanoes, asteroid strikes, solar storms, artificial pandemics, rogue artificial intelligences, planetary evacuation, first contact, alien invasion, alien alliance, alien misunderstanding, alien economic warfare, alien biological contamination. The list kept going, and going, and going. The diplomats watched in disbelief. One ambassador finally whispered, Humans made plans for all of these? Williams nodded. Most of them. The room became deathly quiet. Because the report wasn't describing a species that expected safety. It described a species that expected trouble, and prepared for it. Then the observatory scientist suddenly noticed one final file buried at the bottom of the archive. His eyes widened. His breathing stopped. Slowly he opened it. The title appeared above the chamber, and every alien diplomat immediately began sweating. Sol, Long-Term Evolution Projections. Williams saw the title and immediately groaned. Oh! Vexer turned toward him. What? The human ambassador smiled sheepishly. You guys are really not going to like this one. The first image appeared, and half the room stood up in shock. Because humanity wasn't just planning for the next century. They were planning for what would happen when their sun eventually died. The image hanging above the Galactic Council chamber looked harmless. A bright yellow star. Warm. Stable. Familiar. Humanity called it the sun. But to every alien present, it now looked like a ticking cosmic bomb. The projection displayed billions of years of future stellar evolution. The diplomats watched in stunned silence. Then the simulation advanced, slowly at first, then faster. The sun expanded. Its brightness increased. Mercury vanished. Venus disappeared. Earth's orbit glowed red. Several ambassadors physically recoiled. The observatory scientists stared in horror. You're planning for this? Williams nodded. Of course. Vexer nearly choked. That happens in billions of years. The human smiled. Yes. The diplomat blinked. Billions. Correct. And you're already preparing? The human delegation exchanged confused looks, as if they couldn't understand why that seemed strange. One of the human scientists finally spoke. Wouldn't it be irresponsible not to? The room went silent, because from the human perspective, the logic was obvious. The sun would eventually change. Therefore, humanity would eventually need a solution. Problem. Solution. Simple. Terrifyingly simple. The simulation continued. Earth became uninhabitable. The oceans vanished. The atmosphere changed. The sun swelled into a red giant. Yet the projections didn't stop. They kept going. Massive orbital habitats appeared. Artificial worlds, interstellar colony networks, generation ships, stellar engineering projects. The chamber became deathly quiet. One diplomat finally whispered, "You don't expect to survive this." William smiled. The smile wasn't arrogant. It was confident. The confidence of a species that had spent its entire existence solving impossible problems. "Actually," he said, "we do." The room froze. The human scientist enlarged another file. Project Long Dawn, a proposed series of technologies intended to move entire planets. Not cities, not stations, planets. The diplomats stared in disbelief. Then came proposals for harvesting energy directly from stars, artificial habitats surrounding entire solar systems, interstellar migration plans extending millions of years into the future. The numbers became absurd. The scale became incomprehensible. Finally, Ambassador Vexer stood. His ceremonial robes were damp with sweat. His hands trembled slightly. He looked at the sun, then at the humans, then back at the sun. At last he understood. The star wasn't what frightened him. The wildlife wasn't what frightened him. The disasters weren't what frightened him. Humanity wasn't surviving despite those things. Humanity had been shaped by them, forged by them. A species born beside a violent star, raised on a dangerous world, surrounded by predators, threatened by disasters, and instead of learning fear, they had learned preparation. The chamber remained silent as Vexer spoke one final sentence. "Your sun is how hot?" Williams laughed. "About 5,500 degrees Celsius on the surface." Vexer slowly nodded, then looked around the room. "That explains a lot." The diplomats laughed nervously. The humans laughed genuinely. And somewhere in the official council records, a new assessment was added.